Sometimes the smallest act of kindness is witnessed by eyes that can one day change an entire kingdom. Snow fell gently over the northern forest, blanketing every pine branch and winding trail beneath a quiet layer of white. The world seemed asleep beneath the pale winter sky. Even the wind moved softly, whispering through frozen trees without disturbing the silence that surrounded the lonely cottage at the edge of the woods. It was the last house before the wilderness swallowed everything. Its roof sagged beneath fresh snow. Smoke drifted lazily from the crooked stone chimney, carrying the comforting scent of burning cedar into the icy air. Bundles of dried herbs hung beneath the porch roof, swaying gently whenever a breeze wandered through. The tiny garden beside the cabin had long disappeared beneath frost, yet someone still cared enough to sweep the front steps every morning. Emily Brooks pushed open the weathered wooden door with one shoulder, balancing a steaming bowl of vegetable soup in one hand and a small loaf of fresh bread in the other. She paused for a moment. The cold kissed her pale cheeks as she stepped outside. Her long golden hair slipped from beneath her wool hood, catching tiny snowflakes that sparkled like silver dust. Blue eyes, gentle and thoughtful, wandered toward the towering forest beyond her cottage. She smiled. Not because someone waited for her. No one ever did. She smiled because she hoped. Every morning for nearly 3 weeks, she had carried food to the same ancient oak standing deep inside the forest. Every morning, the food disappeared. She had never seen who took it. At first, she assumed hungry travelers had found her quiet offering. Then she thought perhaps an old hermit lived somewhere nearby. Eventually, she stopped wondering. Whoever needed it more than she did. Emily carefully wrapped the loaf inside a clean linen cloth before placing it into a small wicker basket beside the warm bowl of soup. "You'll get cold if I keep talking to myself," she murmured with a soft laugh. The only answer came from the wind. Closing the cottage door behind her, she stepped onto the narrow trail leading into the forest. Snow crunched softly beneath her worn leather boots. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Birdsong faded. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Yet Emily wasn't afraid. Most people avoided these woods. They called them cursed. They whispered stories about wolves large enough to drag horses into the darkness. About glowing eyes watching from between the trees after sunset. About travelers who entered but never returned. Emily had heard every story. She simply didn't believe fear should decide where kindness could go. A faint breeze carried the scent of pine resin and frozen earth. It reminded her of childhood. Before the pack had rejected her. Before neighbors stopped greeting her. Before doors quietly closed whenever she walked through the village. She had once belonged somewhere. Now, the forest accepted her more gently than people ever had. After nearly 20 minutes, the ancient oak finally came into view. Its massive roots twisted across the frozen ground like the hands of an old guardian protecting forgotten secrets. Snow rested upon every branch, turning the enormous tree into something almost magical beneath the gray winter sky. Emily knelt beside its trunk, exactly where she always left the food. The basket from yesterday was gone. She smiled again. "I'm glad you ate." Carefully, she placed down the fresh bread. Then the warm soup. She adjusted the bowl so it wouldn't tip against the uneven roots. "I made a little extra today." Her voice remained soft, gentle, almost as though speaking to an old friend she had simply never met. "If you're hiding because you're frightened." She looked quietly toward the endless trees surrounding the clearing. "It's all right," silence answered. Emily stood slowly, brushing snow from her blue wool dress. "I won't stay." She turned to leave. A tiny sound stopped her. So faint she almost thought she imagined it. A weak whimper. Then another. It came from somewhere behind the enormous roots. Emily frowned. She carefully walked around the ancient oak. There, hidden beneath tangled branches and half buried in fresh snow, lay a small bundle of black fur. It barely moved. Curled tightly against the freezing ground was a tiny wolf pup. Its coat, dark as midnight, was matted with melting snow. One small paw bore a fresh wound, while its breathing came in slow, uneven breaths. Though clearly exhausted, the little creature lifted its head the moment Emily stepped closer. Golden eyes met hers. Not with trust. Not with fear alone. With determination. The pup gave the weakest growl its tiny body could manage before collapsing back into the snow. Emily's heart tightened. Oh. She slowly knelt several feet away, careful not to frighten it. So it was you. The little wolf tried once more to bare its tiny teeth. Its body trembled violently. Not from anger. From hunger. Emily gently pushed the basket toward it. The warm scent of fresh bread drifted through the icy air. The pup's ears twitched. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, with painful hesitation, the tiny wolf dragged itself one trembling step closer to the food. Emily never reached toward it. She simply waited. Because she understood something broken creatures needed more than anything else. Not rescue. Time to believe they were finally safe. Before we continue, if Emily's kindness touches your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because every chapter reveals how one small act of compassion can change the destiny of an entire kingdom. The tiny black wolf did not move. Its golden eyes remained fixed on Emily, filled with suspicion far older than any creature so young should have known. Every shallow breath caused its small body to tremble against the frozen earth. Fresh snow gathered over its midnight-colored fur, slowly hiding the fragile outline of its tiny frame beneath a blanket of white. Emily stayed exactly where she was. She knew fear. She had lived with it long enough to recognize its shape in another pair of eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her voice barely rose above the whispering wind. The wolf pup answered with another weak growl. It tried to stand. Its injured front paw buckled beneath its weight. The tiny creature collapsed back into the snow, letting out a soft cry before stubbornly forcing itself upright once more. Emily's heart ached. So brave, she murmured. So determined. She slowly lowered herself onto one knee, careful not to appear threatening. Instead of reaching toward the frightened animal, she simply unfolded the linen cloth covering the fresh bread. Warm steam escaped from the bowl of vegetable soup beside it. The delicious scent drifted gently through the winter air. The pup's ears twitched. Its nose lifted ever so slightly. Hunger battled caution. Emily watched the struggle without saying another word. Finally, the little wolf dragged itself forward one painful step. Then another. Each movement looked exhausting. Its injured paw left tiny crimson marks in the snow, though the wound itself appeared no deeper than a sharp scrape against frozen stone. Emily quietly looked away. Broken creatures often accepted kindness more easily when they did not feel watched. Several moments passed. Then she heard the faint sound of careful chewing. A smile touched her lips. "You must have been starving." The pup froze. It glanced toward her, expecting her to steal the food away. Instead, Emily was looking up through the towering pine branches where soft flakes drifted lazily between patches of gray sky. "My mother always said," she spoke gently, almost to herself, "that no one should ever eat alone." The wolf continued watching her. Confused. No human had ever spoken to it like this. Not with anger. Not with commands. Only warmth. When Emily finally looked back, nearly half the loaf had disappeared. The tiny creature was now lapping carefully at the warm soup, though every few seconds it lifted its head to make certain she had not moved any closer. "You don't trust people." She smiled sadly. "I understand." She understood far better than the little wolf could ever imagine. Only 6 months earlier, she had stood before the Crescent Moon pack surrounded by wolves she had called family her entire life. They had turned away one by one. Friends. Neighbors. Even people she had once healed after hunting accidents. No one defended her. Rejected. The words still echoed inside her heart. Not because she had committed any crime. Simply because no alpha had ever claimed her. To them. Unclaimed Omega was a burden. An inconvenience. Someone who would always remain on the edge of the pack. Emily blinked away the memory. The little wolf had finished eating. For the first time since she found it, its breathing seemed calmer. Its ears relaxed ever so slightly. The tiny body was still tense. but no longer preparing to flee. Emily slowly reached into the basket once more. From beneath the folded cloth, she removed a small piece of soft wool. "I made this last night." She carefully laid the folded fabric upon the snow several feet away. "It gets very cold after sunset." The pup stared at the blanket. It did not move. Emily rose quietly to her feet. "I'll come back tomorrow." She brushed fresh snow from her blue cloak. "You don't have to wait for me." She smiled. "But I hope you will." Without another step toward the frightened animal, she turned and began walking back through the forest. The little wolf watched until her figure disappeared between the snow-covered pines. Only then did it cautiously approach the folded wool. It sniffed it once, twice. The fabric carried the faint scent of lavender and cedarwood. Warm. Safe. The pup circled it slowly before curling into the soft blanket. For the first time in many days, it slept. Far beyond the northern mountains, inside the heavily guarded walls of Blackwood Castle, for enormous black wolves paced restlessly within a vast stone courtyard. None of them had eaten since dawn. Their noses remained lifted toward the icy wind. One by one, they caught an unfamiliar scent carried across the frozen forests. Bread, lavender, and the unmistakable kindness of someone they had never met. The oldest of the four wolves suddenly lifted his head. His golden eyes widened. Without warning, all four turned toward the southern wilderness at exactly the same moment. Someone had found the one they had been searching for. The ones who have been abandoned recognize each other without a single word. The next morning arrived wrapped in silver mist. Long before sunrise, Emily Brooks was already awake. The little cottage felt warmer than usual, not because the fire burned brighter, but because she found herself wondering whether the tiny wolf had survived the freezing night. She had told herself not to become attached. It was only a wild animal. Sooner or later, it would return to wherever it belonged. Still, she added another piece of bread to the basket. And another slice of dried venison she had been saving for herself. "You'll probably need this more than I do." She smiled softly before wrapping everything inside clean linen. Outside, the forest remained untouched except for the footprints she had left the previous afternoon. Fresh snow covered nearly everything else. The morning air stung her lungs as she followed the familiar path beneath towering pines. A pair of rabbits darted across the trail. Somewhere overhead, ravens called to one another from snow-covered branches. Everything felt peaceful. Yet Emily noticed something unusual. The forest was watching. Not with danger, with curiosity. She couldn't explain the feeling. It was as though unseen eyes quietly followed every step she took. When the ancient oak finally appeared through the drifting mist, Emily slowed. The basket she had left yesterday rested exactly where she had placed it. Empty. The small wool blanket, however, was gone. "So," a relieved smile spread across her face. "You decided to keep it." She knelt and carefully unpacked the fresh food. "I brought something better today." The scent of warm bread drifted gently through the clearing. Nothing happened. Emily waited. Silence. She looked around the enormous roots. No tiny black wolf. Perhaps it had already gone. Perhaps yesterday had simply been a brief crossing of two lonely lives. She stood quietly. "I suppose this is goodbye." Turning toward the trail, she had taken only 3 steps when she heard it. A soft crunch behind her. She stopped. Another. Then another. Slowly, Emily looked over her shoulder. The little black wolf stood beneath the ancient oak. Its golden eyes remained cautious, but something had changed. The frightened growl was gone. Instead, the pup tilted its head slightly, studying her. Its injured paw still favored the ground, although it seemed steadier than before. Emily smiled. "You came back." The wolf remained still. "So did I." For several long moments neither moved. Then Emily slowly stepped away from the basket. "I'll let you eat first." She sat down on a fallen log nearly 20 feet away. Instead of watching the wolf, she reached into her apron pocket and removed a small bundle of lavender stems she had gathered before winter. Using nimble fingers, she quietly began weaving them into a tiny braid. The little wolf watched every movement. No sudden gestures. No attempt to approach. No trap. Only quiet patience. Eventually, hunger won again. The pup limped toward the basket. This time, it did not rush. It sniffed the bread, then the dried venison. Its ears lifted. Within seconds, it was eating eagerly. Emily pretended not to notice. Instead, she hummed a gentle melody beneath her breath. A lullaby her mother used to sing while snow fell outside their tiny home. The notes floated softly through the clearing. Simple, warm, comforting. The wolf stopped chewing. Its ears turned toward her. Something stirred deep inside the tiny creature. Not memory. Recognition. The melody. It knew that melody. Somewhere. Somehow. Though impossible. Its breathing slowed. Without realizing it, the little wolf lowered itself onto the wool blanket while continuing to listen. Emily finished weaving the lavender into a small loop. She stood slowly. I made this for you. Very carefully, she placed the tiny lavender braid beside the basket. It smells nice. She laughed quietly. Well, I think it does. The wolf sniffed the braid after she stepped away. The calming scent surrounded it. Lavender. Cedar. Home. Far beyond the forest. Hidden inside the towering walls of Blackwood Castle. Four armored warriors stood around an enormous stone table. Each wore black armor, marked with the crest of a silver wolf. They were the king's shadow guard, the most feared protectors in the northern kingdom. Upon the table rested a single object, a fragment of black cloth torn from a royal traveling cloak. One of the warriors suddenly lifted his head. The prince. Another looked toward the northern windows. I can feel him. A third frowned. No. His golden eyes narrowed. I can feel someone else. The eldest among them slowly closed his eyes. The faint scent carried across miles of frozen wilderness reached them once again. Fresh bread. Lavender. Kindness. His expression changed. He isn't alone anymore. Silence settled over the chamber. Then the oldest warrior spoke the words none of them had expected. Prepare the horses. One of the others looked up in surprise. You believe we've found him? The veteran shook his head. No. His gaze remained fixed on the snow-covered horizon beyond the castle walls. I believe. He paused. Someone has already found what the kingdom has been searching for. The hardest goodbyes are the ones spoken without knowing they are the last. For 12 peaceful mornings, nothing changed. Emily Brooks woke before dawn, baked fresh bread while the cottage still glowed with firelight, packed warm food into the same worn wicker basket, and walked the familiar trail beneath snow-covered pines. Each day, the little black wolf was waiting. Never in exactly the same place. Sometimes it hid behind the great roots of the ancient oak. Sometimes beneath the low branches of a nearby fir tree. Once, Emily caught only the flick of its black tail before it disappeared behind the rocks. But it always returned. Little by little, fear loosened its grip. The pup no longer growled whenever she arrived. Instead, it watched quietly as she unpacked breakfast. On the 7th morning, it accepted dried venison from only a few feet away. On the 9th, it allowed her to sit beside the ancient oak while it finished eating. By the 12th, it cautiously rested near her boots while pretending not to notice her presence. Emily smiled to herself. I suppose that means we're becoming friends. The tiny wolf answered by lifting one ear. She laughed. I'll take that as a yes. The wound on its front paw had almost completely healed. Its coat, once dull and tangled, now shone like polished obsidian beneath the winter sunlight. Even its eyes seemed brighter. Golden. Intelligent. Almost too intelligent. Sometimes, Emily felt as though the little creature understood every word she spoke. She never questioned it. Loneliness had taught her not to reject quiet. Miracles. That afternoon, gentle snow began falling again. Emily remained beside the oak longer than usual, weaving another lavender charm while the wolf lay curled upon its blanket. For the first time, the pup moved closer on its own. It slowly rested its head against the side of her knee. Emily froze. Her breath caught. So, she whispered. You finally trust me. Carefully. Very carefully. She reached down. The little wolf did not move away. Her fingers brushed the soft fur behind its ears. Warm, silky, real. The pup closed its eyes. A faint rumble rose deep inside its chest. Not a growl. A quiet sound of contentment. Emily smiled through unexpected tears. I've missed this. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be trusted, to be needed. For several peaceful minutes, neither of them moved. The forest itself seemed unwilling to disturb the moment. Then, a cold wind swept across the clearing. The wolf's ear shot upward. Its body became perfectly still, its golden eyes fixed toward the distant northern mountains. Emily noticed the sudden change. What is it? The little wolf stood. Every trace of playfulness disappeared. It sniffed the air once, twice. Its muscles tightened beneath its sleek black fur. Something, or someone, was coming. The pup looked back at Emily. For just an instant, there was something almost human inside its gaze. Gratitude, sadness, reluctance. Without warning, it nudged the lavender charm with its nose toward Emily's hands, as though giving her a gift in return. Then it stepped backward. One pace, another. Emily stood slowly. Wait. The wolf hesitated. You don't have to leave. The tiny creature's ears lowered. It wanted to stay. Every instinct in its small body pulled it toward the girl who had fed it, protected it, and expected nothing in return. Yet another instinct. Older. Stronger. Impossible to resist. A distant howl echoed across the mountains. Deep. Powerful. Ancient. The little wolf lifted its head immediately. It answered with the softest cry Emily had ever heard. Not loud enough for human ears beyond the clearing, but enough. Far away, someone had heard. Emily took one careful step forward. If that's your family, she said gently, then you should go. The wolf looked at her one last time. Snowflakes settled across its black fur. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Emily forced herself to smile. I'll be happy knowing you're safe. The pup walked toward her. Not away. It pressed its forehead lightly against her hand. A silent farewell. Then, with surprising speed, it disappeared between the towering pines. Emily stared after it. The forest swallowed every trace within seconds. Only tiny paw prints remained in the fresh snow. She knelt where it had stood. The lavender charm was gone. Instead, resting upon the blanket lay something she had never seen before. A tiny silver pendant shaped like a wolf. Its craftsmanship was exquisite. Far too fine for any ordinary traveler. Emily picked it up carefully. It must have belonged to someone. The metal felt strangely warm despite the freezing air. She looked once more toward the empty forest. I hope you find your home. The wind carried her words into the wilderness. High above the snow-covered mountains, four enormous black wolves raced through the forest with impossible speed. Their paws barely touched the frozen ground. Leading them all was a massive silver-eyed wolf whose presence alone caused every creature in the forest to flee. The eldest shadow guard suddenly stopped atop a rocky ridge overlooking the valley. He lowered his nose to the wind. His breathing slowed. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. He lives. The other three wolves stopped beside him. And the girl? Asked one. The eldest looked toward the lonely forest where a single trail led to a small wooden cottage hidden among the pines. She has no idea. His voice grew quiet. But before this winter ends, he watched the distant smoke rising from Emily's chimney. The entire kingdom will know her name. Ironically, the four wolves who had crossed half a kingdom to find their prince were the ones waiting for permission to approach a girl who believed she was worth nothing. Morning light spilled gently across the snow-covered clearing, turning every frozen branch into silver crystal. Smoke curled from Emily Brooks' chimney as she stood outside her cottage, shaking flour from her apron after placing another loaf of bread inside the small stone oven. The scent drifted into the forest. Fresh bread, honey, warm butter. She smiled to herself. Old habits refused to disappear. Although the little black wolf had been gone for 2 days, she still baked one extra loaf every morning. Maybe a hungry traveler will need it. The words sounded convincing. Her heart knew otherwise. She missed him. Not because he belonged to her. Because for 12 quiet mornings, someone had waited for her without judging her name, her status, or the mark that made her a rejected Omega. She picked up the empty basket and walked toward the edge of the forest anyway. I suppose one last visit won't hurt. Deep among the towering pines, four silent figures watched her approach. Rowan Ashcroft lowered his hand, signaling the others to remain hidden. No one moves. The youngest shadow guard frowned. She comes here every day. I know. Shouldn't we speak with her? Not yet. The older warrior never looked away from Emily. His Highness must make that decision. They followed silently as Emily reached the ancient oak. The clearing looked exactly as it had yesterday. Untouched snow. Ancient roots. Soft winter light filtering through bare branches. Emily knelt beside the place where she had first found the tiny wolf. She placed the fresh loaf of bread upon the flat stone. I know you're probably far away by now. She laughed quietly. But if you're nearby, she brushed a few snowflakes from the crust. I brought your favorite. For several moments she simply sat there, listening. The forest answered with nothing except the distant tapping of a woodpecker. She stood. It's all right. Her voice remained gentle. I'm just happy you're alive. Turning toward home, she never noticed 4 pairs of golden eyes soften beneath the shadows of the pines. The youngest guard swallowed hard. She truly believes he'll never return. Rowan nodded. She expects nothing. Not even gratitude. No. The commander looked toward the untouched loaf. That is why she deserves it. Hours later, the northern wind changed. Every wolf in the forest lifted its head. A powerful scent swept across the valley. Ancient. Dominant. Royal. Even the shadow guard straightened instinctively. Rowan smiled for the first time since arriving. He's here. Far beyond the tree line, a massive black stallion emerged through the falling snow. Its hooves struck the frozen ground with calm, measured strength. Upon its back rode a man dressed entirely in black. His fur-lined cloak flowed behind him like a shadow across the white landscape. Dark hair stirred in the winter wind. Silver-gray eyes surveyed the forest with quiet authority. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood had arrived. No royal escort. No banners. Only the king himself. He dismounted without speaking. The stallion remained perfectly still. Rowan and the other guards immediately knelt. My king. Adrian acknowledged them with the slightest movement of his head. The prince. Safe. Rowan pointed toward the ancient oak. He remained with the Omega exactly as reported. Adrian's silver eyes settled upon the loaf of bread resting alone in the snow. He left yesterday. Yes, your majesty. And she still came. She has come every morning. The king walked slowly toward the flat stone. The bread was still warm. He rested one gloved hand lightly upon it. His expression remained unreadable. Yet something changed in his eyes. Rowan quietly removed the silver pendant Emily had unknowingly left behind after examining it the previous evening. We recovered this near her cottage. Adrian accepted the pendant. The royal crest engraved upon its reverse confirmed everything. The prince himself had left it. Not by accident. As a gift. As thanks. Only members of the royal bloodline possessed such pendants. No outsider had ever received one. The king closed his hand around the silver wolf. She never tried to sell it? Rowan looked surprised. No, Majesty. She doesn't even know what it is. Silence settled over the clearing. Then, a faint rustle echoed behind the ancient oak. Every guard instinctively reached for his sword. Adrian simply turned. From behind the massive roots stepped the tiny black wolf. Healthy now. Its coat gleamed beneath the winter sun. The little creature ignored everyone else. Ignoring 4 elite guards. Ignoring the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. Its golden eyes searched only one direction. Toward the narrow trail leading to Emily's cottage. It gave a soft, hopeful whine. Adrian watched quietly. So, he murmured. You've already chosen. The little wolf wagged its tail once. Then sat beside the untouched loaf of bread Emily had left behind. Waiting. As though absolutely certain. She would come back tomorrow. Sometimes destiny does not knock on the door. It waits outside, hoping a kind heart will open it first. The following morning, dawn painted the eastern sky with pale shades of gold and lavender. Emily Brooks awoke before the first birds began to sing. For reasons she could not explain, her heart felt unusually light. She lit the fire, kneaded fresh dough upon the wooden table, and hummed the same lullaby she had sung beside the ancient oak every morning. The little cottage filled with the comforting scent of warm bread and cedar smoke. As the loaf finished baking, Emily wrapped it carefully in clean linen. Then she paused. She laughed softly at herself. I suppose this really is becoming a habit. Even knowing the little wolf had found its family, she could not leave the forest empty-handed. Kindness, once practiced long enough, no longer waited for a reason. Outside, tiny snowflakes drifted lazily through the crisp winter air. Emily followed the familiar trail beneath towering pines, her boots leaving gentle prints across untouched snow. Everything seemed peaceful. Yet hidden beyond the trees, for pairs of watchful eyes followed every step. Rowan remained motionless. The younger guards instinctively lowered their heads as another powerful scent entered the clearing. Their king had arrived before sunrise. Adrian Blackwood stood silently beneath the shadow of an ancient pine. He wore no jeweled crown. Only a black wool cloak fastened by a silver clasp shaped like a wolf. His silver eyes never left the approaching Omega. So, he said quietly, this is the one. Rowan nodded. Yes, Majesty. The Alpha King expected many things. A proud noblewoman seeking reward. A frightened villager hoping for protection. Perhaps even someone eager to boast that she had saved a rare wolf. Instead, he saw a young woman whose dress had been carefully mended several times, whose gloves had been stitched by hand, whose boots were worn from long walks through winter forests. She carried fresh bread. Not for herself. For someone who might never return. Adrian remained silent. For the first time in many years, he found himself unable to look away. Emily reached the ancient oak and smiled. The loaf she had left yesterday was gone. So, she whispered happily, you came back after all. Before she could kneel, a familiar black blur darted from behind the roots. The little wolf. It raced straight toward her. Emily laughed, a bright, genuine laugh that echoed through the quiet forest. There you are. The pup leaped into her arms before she even had time to kneel completely. Its tail wagged wildly. It rubbed its head beneath her chin exactly like an excited puppy greeting its favorite person after a long journey. Emily hugged the little creature gently. I missed you too. The wolf answered with happy little sounds that made the shadow guards exchange astonished glances. The prince has never greeted anyone like that, whispered one. Rowan only nodded. I know. Even Adrian's composed expression softened almost imperceptibly. The tiny wolf climbed onto Emily's lap and proudly nudged the fresh bread with its nose. You remembered. Emily broke the loaf into small pieces. You really do love this bread. The wolf happily accepted every bite. Between mouthfuls, it looked back toward the forest several times, as though trying to encourage someone hidden among the trees. Emily noticed. Is your family nearby? The little wolf wagged its tail. She smiled warmly. If they are. Her blue eyes wandered toward the silent forest. Thank you for letting me borrow such a wonderful little friend. No answer came. Only the gentle whisper of snow drifting through pine branches. Emily never realized she was speaking directly toward the most powerful Alpha King in the kingdom. Adrian stood perfectly still. Her words carried no expectation. No request. No hidden ambition. She thanked strangers she believed would never reveal themselves. Rowan quietly spoke. Majesty. The king lifted one hand, asking for silence. He wanted to watch a little longer. The little wolf suddenly climbed down from Emily's lap. Instead of eating again, it gently caught the edge of her cloak between its tiny teeth. What is it? It tugged softly. You want me to follow you? The pup barked once, then began walking toward the trees. After several steps, it stopped and looked back. Waiting. Emily hesitated. I shouldn't wander too far. The little wolf waited patiently. She laughed. You've become rather persistent. Picking up her basket, Emily followed. The pup led her only a short distance beyond the ancient oak. Then it stopped. It sat quietly beside a snow-covered clearing. Emily looked around in confusion. I don't understand. The little wolf turned toward the forest and gave one clear, confident howl. Silence followed. Then, from between the towering pines, 4 enormous black wolves emerged one after another. Their midnight coats shimmered beneath the winter sun. Their golden eyes never left Emily. She froze. Her breath caught. The basket slipped gently from her fingers into the snow. The little wolf calmly walked forward and sat directly between the 4 giant wolves and the trembling young Omega, as though introducing the only human it had chosen to trust. The strongest creatures do not bow because they are forced to. They bow because they recognize a heart worthy of protecting. Emily Brooks could not breathe. The 4 enormous black wolves stood only a few yards away, their midnight coats shimmering beneath the falling snow. Each one was nearly twice the size of an ordinary wolf. Their broad shoulders rippled with quiet strength, and their golden eyes carried an intelligence that sent a chill through the frozen clearing. She had heard stories about wolves like these. Every child in the Northern Kingdom had. The shadow wolves. The royal guardians. Hunters whispered that once they chose a target, no one escaped. Emily instinctively took one small step backward. Not because she feared death. Because she feared startling. The little wolf standing between them. The tiny black pup looked up at her. Its tail wagged once. Then it walked toward the largest of the 4 wolves. Emily watched in silent confusion. The great wolf lowered his massive head. Instead of correcting the pup, he gently touched his nose against the little one's forehead. Respect. Not authority. The gesture made no sense. The little wolf turned again and hurried back to Emily. Without hesitation, it sat against her boots, looking proudly at the 4 giant wolves. Almost as though introducing her. The clearing fell completely silent. Snowflakes drifted lazily between them. Emily slowly lowered herself onto one knee. It's all right. Her voice remained soft despite the pounding of her heart. I won't hurt him. The little wolf immediately climbed into her lap. She wrapped one protective arm around its small body. The 4 royal wolves remained motionless. None growled. None bared their teeth. None advanced another step. Instead, the eldest among them slowly lowered himself onto his front legs. Then another. Then another. Finally, all 4 enormous wolves bowed their heads toward the young Omega. Emily stared in disbelief. No, she whispered. You don't have to. Her words faded into the quiet forest. She could not understand what she was seeing. The little wolf rested comfortably against her chest, completely relaxed. Its eyes slowly closed as though it had reached the safest place in the world. Behind the trees, Adrian Blackwood watched everything without speaking. Rowan glanced toward his king. They've acknowledged her. Adrian gave the smallest nod. They have. No outsider has ever received that honor. I know. His silver eyes never left Emily. She looked terrified. Embarrassed. Almost apologetic. As though she believed she did not deserve the respect being shown to her. That realization unsettled him more than anything else. Emily carefully stroked the pup behind its ears. I think. She looked uncertainly toward the 4 giant wolves. I think he belongs with you. The little wolf immediately shook its head and pressed closer against her. One of the younger shadow wolves made a soft, amused sound deep inside his chest. Even Rowan's stern expression softened. The prince had made his choice perfectly clear. Emily smiled sadly. You've spoiled him. She gently scratched beneath the pup's chin. If he keeps following me home, he'll never learn to hunt. The little wolf looked up with bright golden eyes. Then, to everyone's surprise, it gently took hold of the sleeve of her blue cloak. Not pulling, simply holding it, as though afraid she might disappear. Emily laughed quietly. Oh, you don't want me to leave? The pup answered with a tiny bark. Behind the trees, Adrian closed his eyes for a brief moment. His nephew had not trusted anyone since the attack that separated him from the royal escort. Not the healers. Not the palace servants. not even members of the Shadow Guard. Yet after less than 2 weeks with this forgotten Omega, he clung to her as though she were home itself. Adrian finally stepped forward. The sound of boots compressing fresh snow echoed gently through the clearing. Emily immediately looked up. Her smile faded. A tall man emerged from between the pines. He moved with calm confidence, his black cloak flowing behind him, silver eyes reflecting the pale winter light. Nothing about him was loud. Nothing demanded attention. Yet the entire forest seemed to acknowledge his presence. The 4 great wolves immediately rose to their feet. Not in alarm, in respect. Each lowered its head toward the approaching stranger. Emily instinctively stood, still holding the little wolf close against her chest. She had never seen this man before. Yet every instinct told her he was someone far beyond an ordinary traveler. The little wolf twisted excitedly in her arms. With a happy cry, it leaped down into the snow and raced toward the newcomer. The tall man knelt. The pup reached him within seconds and happily pressed its head against his hand. The stranger smiled, a quiet smile that transformed his normally composed expression. "You've been keeping everyone worried," he said softly. The little wolf answered with a cheerful bark. Then, instead of remaining beside the man, it turned around, ran straight back to Emily, and sat proudly between them, looking first at her, then at him, as though insisting that the 2 people it loved most should finally meet. A kingdom is not changed by the one who wears the crown. It is changed by the one who teaches the crown what kindness looks like. Emily Brooks stood perfectly still. The falling snow settled silently upon her golden hair, yet she barely noticed the cold. The tall stranger before her carried himself with effortless authority. His black cloak stirred gently in the winter wind, and his silver eyes held a calm strength unlike anything she had ever seen. She lowered her gaze respectfully. I'm sorry." The words escaped before she understood why. "I didn't know this little one belonged to someone." The tiny black wolf immediately trotted back to her side and leaned against her leg. The stranger glanced down at the pup. A faint smile touched his lips. "It seems he disagrees." Emily blinked. The warmth in the man's voice surprised her. She had expected anger, accusation, perhaps even punishment. Instead, he sounded quietly grateful. She looked down at the little wolf. "I only fed him." The pup wagged its tail. "I couldn't leave him hungry." Adrian Blackwood studied her for several silent moments. No fear of punishment. No request for reward. She was already explaining herself as though kindness required an apology. "You cared for him every day." Emily smiled awkwardly. "It wasn't difficult. You crossed the forest through snowstorms. He was too small to hunt. You gave him food meant for yourself. He needed it more. You never asked who he belonged to. I didn't think it mattered." Each answer came without hesitation. Simple, honest, as though there had never been another possible choice. Behind Adrian, Rowan exchanged a quiet glance with the other shadow guards. Every report they had gathered over the past week had been true. She expected nothing. Not gratitude. Not recognition. Only that the little wolf would survive. Adrian slowly stepped closer. The 4 great wolves respectfully remained where they were. The tiny pup looked back and forth between the 2 humans before happily sitting exactly halfway between them. Emily noticed the silver pendant hanging from Adrian's gloved hand. Her eyes widened. "My pendant." She quickly shook her head. "No." She corrected herself with an embarrassed smile. "It isn't mine." The little wolf left it behind. "I meant to return it if I ever found its owner." Adrian gently opened his hand. The silver wolf crest caught the winter sunlight. "You never tried to sell it?" Emily looked genuinely confused. "Why would I? It appeared valuable. Then it belonged to someone who would surely miss it." Her answer settled over the clearing like fresh snow. Rowan quietly exhaled. No noblewoman inside the capital would have answered so simply. Adrian extended the pendant toward her. "Keep it." Emily immediately stepped back. "I couldn't." "You should." "It isn't mine." "It is now." She shook her head again. "I only cared for a lost little wolf. You cared for far more than that." The tiny pup barked happily. Emily looked from the pendant to the little wolf, then back to the stranger. I don't understand. Adrian slowly knelt so his eyes rested level with hers. The gesture startled every member of the Shadow Guard. Kings did not kneel before strangers. Not even slightly. Yet, Adrian cared little for appearances. He gently rested one hand upon the little wolf's head. This little one. His voice remained calm. Is my nephew. Emily's breath caught. Your. She looked at the pup. Then at the 4 enormous wolves. Then back to Adrian. He. Her thoughts refused to connect. He isn't an ordinary wolf. No. Adrian answered quietly. He is Prince Oliver Blackwood. The world seemed to stop. Emily stared at the little wolf now happily chewing the edge of her blue cloak. The prince? She remembered wrapping him in an old wool blanket, scolding him for trying to walk on an injured paw, laughing when he stole pieces of bread from the basket. She had even sung lullabies while he slept. Oh, she covered her mouth. I'm so sorry. Adrian frowned slightly. For what? I treated him like. Her eyes filled with embarrassed tears. A lost puppy. A gentle laugh escaped Rowan before he could stop himself. Even the other Shadow Guards smiled. The little prince barked proudly and rubbed against Emily's leg again, clearly delighted by the memory. Adrian's quiet smile returned. I believe. He looked affectionately at the pup. That was exactly what he needed. The little prince suddenly transformed. Soft silver light surrounded his tiny body. Emily instinctively stepped backward. The light shimmered only for a heartbeat. Where the little wolf had been sitting now stood a white-skinned boy of about 7 years old, with tousled black hair and bright golden eyes, still wrapped in the tiny blue scarf Emily had sewn for him. Without the slightest hesitation, the child rushed forward and threw both arms around her waist. I found you again, he whispered happily. Emily's eyes overflowed with tears as she slowly embraced him. The clearing fell silent. Adrian watched the forgotten Omega holding the future prince of the kingdom as though he were simply a child who had once been cold and hungry. In that single moment, the Alpha King realized the kingdom had not merely found the woman who saved his nephew. It had found the woman capable of teaching a future king how mercy begins with one warm loaf of bread, one gentle hand, and one heart that never stopped choosing kindness.